Welcome to Dollars and Cents, a monthly finance podcast presented by Altra Federal Credit Union and the Leighton Podcast Network.
Welcome into another edition of Dollars and Cents here on the Leighton Podcast Network. On this podcast, we discuss all things dollars and cents, help you out with financial advice, financial wherewithal, hopefully make it a little easier for you to handle all those dollars and cents. Today, though, we have Danielle Anderson. She is the manager of youth strategies at Altra Federal Credit Union. And we're talking about young people and finances. Elaborate kind of on young people, money. When is the right time or when is a good time to start that financial education for young people?
We think that any time is a good time to start. Really, you can start very young. You can start early by just telling them what a dollar bill is, what are coins, who's on them, what the value is. We do things at Altra where we have sessions where we're just talking about those things. You know, one of the things that I'm doing right now with my son at home is I'm teaching him that 4 quarters equals $1 so that he can see that exchange, that we're doing equal things, but he sees 4 and then I see 1. So just teaching that concept, you know, as early as 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and just getting them comfortable with the fact that there is coin money, there's paper bills, and really any other type of money that you're willing to talk to them about.
And you can really incorporate early math lessons into money, right?
Absolutely.
How important is that? Because, you know, we have these kind of early math lessons a lot of us like to do with our kids, even before they start school, right? We're just doing those at home with our kids. Is it important to incorporate money into that? Because it kind of has a double benefit right there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you can look at something as a $1 bill, 100 cents, take that as 100. And if you want to say, well, what happens if you gave me 50 cents? So 100 minus 50, what is that? It ultimately boils down to potentially just cash handling skills at a super young age using just math. It's super beneficial. You know, I know a lot of places are cashless or we use our cards, things like that, but it's still important to have those money skills. Think of if you go to a rummage sale or you stop at a lemonade stand or something like that. You want kids to be able to have that money, have that value, and know of that exchange and what they're getting back and what they spent that money on.
We were at a sports tournament this past weekend, my family and I, and my 12-year-old volunteered at the concession stand and they accepted only cash. And they obviously didn't have a register or anything like that. So she had to make change. She had to, you know, had to take the money, figure out what people spent, figure out how much money they needed back, you know, and that's something that we kind of worked on with my kids when they were younger. So we saw the benefit of it right there in real life, you know, so it was pretty cool.
I remember doing that. I was in 4-H and we were at the fair. We had a concession stand, and that honestly, I think, is where my love of money started to come from, you know, being able to give that change back and add everything up. And yeah, it's just simple math skills.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun too for kids to do that. Yeah. In this day and age, obviously, Danielle, in 2024, we have lots of mobile applications, right? Websites that can give interactive tools that can help kids. Would you elaborate on what some of those are and the benefits of those?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a ton of different things that we say that you can go to. usmint.gov is a really good one, talking about coins and how that process works, how they're made. uscurrency.gov, that is a resource that we use in a lot of ours. They actually have videos that go through the process of talking about even just security features of a bill and what that looks like, or what did money look like 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. We also talk a lot about like the save, spend, share concept. So you can take something as simple as 3 jars and put a certain value into save, into spend, and to share. You know, we typically say a good amount is 70% spend, 20 save, 10 share, but really it ultimately comes down to the person and what they're comfortable with. We do have those jars in our offices that we give to kids, again, to teach that early concept of learning. If you take $1, how do you split that up? We've given kids 10 dimes before and said, this is the equivalent. So again, going to that math skill, 1 dime is 10%. And how does that equal into $1? And then the Fed Reserve, they have a lot of really great resources on their website. And then we also have Bonsai and Zogo that we offer to the community for free.
And you guys do in-person classes too?
We do. Yep.
For financial health too, for kids to learn about those kind of things, which is pretty cool too. Danielle Anderson is our guest here on Dollars and Cents. She is the manager of youth strategies at Altra Federal Credit Union. I know for my kids, we started savings accounts for them when they were pretty young. And I know my parents did that for me. You know, back when I was a kid, it was like you actually had to go to the bank and you had, you know, your little checkbook or your little book where you kept track of your money. My kids now, they will go online and look at their account online, right? And I have it set up where a certain amount of money transfers into their account every month or every week, and then they can watch that. How important is it to teach kids about online banking? Because that's the way that we have gone. It's probably the way we're going to continue to go. It's a little different than it was, you know, probably when you and I were kids. So what are the benefits and how do you teach kids about online banking?
Online banking is completely different. You know, we do still give kids their little registers when they come in, but as you said, a lot of it is online now. We don't have a lot of kids coming in all the time to do those deposits. So it's still important to teach them, but it's also important to teach them the fraud aspect as well. So I know there are a lot of financials that maybe restrict younger ages of going into online banking or opening up an account online, let's say, because they do still want to see that that child is there. But online banking is still important because it allows you to see your money in real time. Being able to go to the store and say, I have $20 in my account. What can I spend it on? Or if you want to spend something, let's say it's $50 and you have $45, well, then you're keeping your child from going into the negative and teaching that consequence and things like that. You know, there's also a lot of accounts that do have protections and things, which I recognize. But really, just being able to see your money in real time is very different. And that's the world that we live in. You know, you go, you swipe your card, and that money is taken out instantly, which is similar to cash. But it does have a very different feeling than if you spend cash.
I know we ran a story on our news program In the Know earlier this week. Target has become the latest big retailer that will not accept personal checks anymore for purchases at their store. Is it worth it to still teach kids how to write a personal check, what a personal check is, or is that something that is going to go away completely? I mean, is that something that's still worth teaching them about?
Sure. So that is something that we run into quite often. We do still teach kids how to write out a check because I think there ultimately will always be people that still want check. Think of rent payments. They're going to go off and get their first apartment, and more than likely that landlord, if they're not taking it automatically from their account, they're going to want a check. And sometimes even if they're taking it automatically, they still want a check for that first transaction. Or think of security deposits, whether, again, it's for an apartment or you're renting something from a store. It's still something that I think is very valuable. I do think 50 years from now, we probably won't be using checks, but I would say that right now it is still an important thing that they can learn. And if anything, it just helps practice penmanship too.
That's a good point. Yeah, they got to learn how to sign their name.
Yes,
yeah,
they do.
That's a great point. You know, this is a bit off subject, but I just thought of it because of what you said about checks, say 50 years from now. Do you think cash will go away eventually? Will we go to a completely cashless economy?
I don't know that we would ever go to completely cashless. I think there's still a lot of value in having cash. I don't know. I don't want to say that there's less fraud because obviously, you know, there's counterfeit and things out there like that. But there's something different about spending physical cash. Yeah. And some
I think
people
it's
like
harder to
feeling.
be fraudulent when you have cash, for sure. You know, I mean, obviously, yeah, you can get a counterfeit bill, but that seems a lot harder than some of these online scams or some of these this online fraud that occurs.
It's very easy to type your debit card or your credit card into something that is going to end up taking that. It's not so easy to hand money over to someone at McDonald's and you're still going to get your burger, your fries, whatever it is you're getting. But yeah, it's very different. I think that there is a place for both cash and card. You have a lot of places or a lot of people, I should say, that like the rewards that you get with cards. But from a budgeting aspect, typically it is a lot easier to budget with cash. You still see a lot of people using things like the envelope system, where they say, I'm only going to spend $400 this month on groceries. And once that's out, it's out. I'm only allowed to spend $50 on entertainment. Once that's out, it's out. So I think there's something to be said about the feeling that you get with physical cash.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because it is certainly easier to budget and a lot easier, conversely, to go over your budget if you're just swiping your card all the time, right?
Easy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, that kind of leads into our next subject was what Danielle put in her email to us was watch that swipey thing, which is just a fabulous way to say it, because debit cards, credit cards, that's what a lot of us use for the majority of our purchases now, and it is easy to just swipe that along. And I know a lot of young people, teenagers, young adults even get into trouble with credit card debt, with going over their limit, insufficient funds when they're using their debit card. So what can we do to teach kids early on about monitoring that, making sure they don't run up a lot of credit card debt or, spend more than they have with their debit card?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I take that line from our VP of Member Experience, because I was doing a junior achievement session with her, and she was talking about how her boys, who were in second and third grade at the time, talk about, Mom, well, just use that swipey thing and you can get whatever you want at the store. And that's just resonated with me for several years now. Yeah. But yeah, it's teaching them that it's not unlimited money. If it's a debit card, it's still tied to an account. You still have to manage the money that's in there, and you still have to say, well, if I only have $50, I can't go over that. It's no different really, or it shouldn't really be any different than using cash. You still only have that amount of money available to you. When it comes to credit cards, it's a little bit harder because you pay that later. Right. So you may not have that money now. Maybe you have a car repair that is super costly and you have to put it on a card or something like that. But I think it ultimately comes down to teaching your kids how to budget for those things. So if something does happen later in life, they have their own place and the furnace goes out. Well, how did we help prepare you for that? Were you putting money away and now you can pay for that? Or maybe you didn't have that ability, but you understand that, okay, you put this on the card, you do still need to pay that off. It's not just free money that's given to you, which I will fully admit, when I got my first card at 18, I got so many offers, and I took the first one that I had, and I don't think I fully understood that what a credit limit is. I thought I just got $500 a month that I could go spend.
I did the same thing when I was young.
Yeah, and I don't know what happened, but it just got up, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have to pay this back. And I learned, which I think is one reason why I'm so passionate about it now and teaching kids at a young age about this, because I did go through it myself and trying to help families and kids not have to go through that.
I remember when I was in college, credit card companies actually came to the college, set up tables in our cafeteria, and just signed up anybody. And you didn't have to prove that you had any kind of credit history, any kind of collateral, nothing. They just signed people up. But you got that free t-shirt. Yeah, right. Yeah, you got some kind of swag and you got the credit card. And I did the same thing. I ran it up, didn't think about it. And then it came to a point where I got a bill one day and I'm like, I can't pay this, And I remember specifically, I have a vivid memory of cutting up the card and not using it anymore and paying it all off. And it felt pretty darn good when I did pay it off, you know. But yeah, it's a problem that a lot of young people get into. Is it important then to teach kids maybe, or would you recommend teaching kids that credit cards, maybe not debit cards, but credit cards specifically, are only for emergencies? You should just kind of have that in your back pocket, so to speak, for emergencies or for really big purchases?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it ultimately comes down to your personal responsibility. If you know that you have the self-control to say, I'm going to use this and this is what I'm going to put all of my gas on. There's a lot of credit cards out there that give really great rewards, and some people really do benefit from that. But I do think that credit is also a really great tool to be able to show kids that if something does happen, like, it's there, but be responsible with it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go take your friends out for a night on the town just because.
Right.
Still stay within your budget. Me personally, I love my airline credit that I get. So, we put bills on there. If I'm going to have to pay the bill anyway, I put it on the credit card and then I just pay it off immediately. So I don't even always wait until the end of the month. I might pay that bill and then immediately go online and pay that off right away.
Right.
So if you can be
just to get the benefits.
Yes, just to get the benefits.
I see. Yeah. Well, that's really the key, though, is paying it off immediately, right? Because it's the interest rate that really kills people, right?
Yep. It's if you carry the balance from month to month, that's when that interest is going to hit you. Any purchases that you make within that cycle, it's not always, March 1st to March 31st or whatever. It is a cycle of whatever it is. And any purchases made then, as long as you pay it off before your next cycle hits, you should be okay. It's when you start carrying it month after month after month. And sometimes credit cards are so high that it's the interest that ends up killing people with the debt and everything else versus the initial purchase.
Should people wait to get a credit card until they have a job?
I would say yes, to be able to pay that back. Again, it goes back to budgeting. If you don't have an income, how are you making those payments?
Right.
So I think, yes, you definitely should have a job or at least some type of income. That could be side hustles too, but something where that you're going to be able to pay that bill.
We mentioned this earlier in this conversation, but giving kids the opportunity to earn money in a safe environment like a mobile app or an online game like Bonsai, how does that, contribute down the road? Because if you start that early, then kids sort of get that financial wherewithal. Some of these games you can start as young as like 7 or 8 years old, right? And you start kind of going that way, I guess, or having something like a lemonade stand, which is, you said, is in the Bonsai app, which is really cool. But kind of little things like that are just teaching kids about earning money, taking money from customers, whatever it might be. How beneficial is that going forward?
I think that that's super beneficial. It's starting to teach responsibility on top of budgeting, on top of good financial health, healthy financial habits, things like that, where they're understanding that money doesn't just come off trees.
Right.
It's something where it's an exchange. You have to do something to earn that money. Like you said, Bonsai, where it's a safe environment. It's very easy for kids to be able to go in. And what it does is it actually teaches kids that, if you go to a store, you have overhead. So you have to go buy the product. So you have to put a little bit of sweat equity into it.
Yeah.
You have to even maybe a little bit of actual equity.
Right.
In the game, it shows you kind of how that is without having to potentially make mistakes later and actually have it affect your credit, affect jobs, apartments, things like that, because so many places look at credit history now that you could make a mistake and it could be, again, something as tiny as you bought a $15 shirt, but you didn't pay it off, and then it just compounds month after month. And I think that these games and these apps are an easy way to meet the kids where they're at and do it in a fun way. A lot of them have really cool graphics. They're very interactive. It's not just sitting there and reading. You're actually interacting with something, which I think helps the retention. There's not even just that. There's other things out there. One thing that I can think of in particular is the Osmo system. I believe it's through Amazon. And we got that for my son, and he loves the pizza game. He owns a pizza shop, and the customers come in and they say, I want this on my pizza. He puts the fake toppings on, and then he has to manage making the pizza and then taking the cash. So then he's got to go over to the cash register, and it says, I paid you with a $20 bill, and my bill was $10. What do you give me?
Yeah.
And then, he gives the virtual $10 bill back. Or
Very
sometimes
cool.
I teach them it's 2 5s. And so it's just little things like that to keep them engaged and keep them wanting to learn about money.
Well, it's cool too. You mentioned, overhead, because it teaches them, if you're in a business situation or in a sales situation, it's money in, it's money out. You have to buy supplies. Just because somebody's giving you $20, say, you don't get to keep all of that $20. Some of that has to go back to paying your workers, buying supplies, paying the rent, keeping the lights on, all that kind of stuff. So that's just really good real world lessons there for kids, for sure. Money in families, in relationships, it's something that a lot of times causes consternation. You know, it's something that's hard to talk about a lot of times. We hear all the times that couples, people who are married, whatever, a lot of times money is something that they get into a lot of disagreements about, you know, something like that. So I think because of that, it's something that people just choose to not talk about a lot of times. How important is it to have, you know, open dialogue between a person and their partner, and then in turn with kids, you know, and just have that not be a taboo subject?
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, it is one of the things that we see quite often from a parental standpoint. It can be embarrassing. You know, you may not want to admit to your child that you can't afford to go to XYZ this weekend because you don't have the money. Or it can also be a taboo subject because maybe they didn't talk about it with their parents, so they think that it's supposed to be this very private thing. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is having that open communication and saying, you know, if you're with your partner, say, hey, we need to pay for groceries this month, so maybe instead of going bowling with the kids, we go do this, or find some free activities or something like that. It is a very big cause of relationship, divorce, things like that, a big strain. And I think ultimately we want to help people be financially healthy, financially well. A lot of things, I mean, especially in today's economy, it can be hard. You know, we've got groceries going up, activities going up, gas, you know, everything seems to be getting more expensive. But you could even do things, something as simple as including the family in on budgeting. So if your kids, let's say, want to go to Disney, okay, well, let's come up with a family budget. How can we do this? Are you going to start setting $5 a week away, $10 a week? Or maybe it's even something a lot smaller. They just want to go on a school field trip, something like that. And I think really when it comes to relationships and the partner, it is almost a trickle-down effect. Whoever managed the finances in the household of your parents is, you know, was it mom, dad? It kind of comes down the line. I think even just personally, I do a lot of our finances, but I also work at a credit union, so it's very easy for me to have access. I teach things like this. Right. But it was a little bit more of an open conversation in my family where I knew kind of where we sat with things. But then I also think seeing things firsthand help a lot as well. Yeah.
And I think you're right, though. I think if, you know, two people in a relationship are having those conversations openly, even if the kids aren't necessarily contributing to that conversation when they're very young, they're hearing it. It's an open dialogue. I mean, we know as parents, kids are so perceptive. I mean, they hear everything. They pick things up, you know, so just hearing that as an open conversation around them, I think just sort of indirectly starts that financial education, you know, of them for sure. Yeah. So, and I think it's important too, if you do end up in trouble, like let's say you are the person in charge of finances, if you do end up in trouble, again, that open dialogue with your partner to before it gets bad or too bad, I should say, just being able to talk about that so that you can come together so that it's not a bigger issue later. You know, I think back to another podcast I had listened to, and this woman called in and she's like, I racked up $80,000 of credit card debt and my partner doesn't know. And part of me is kind of like, well, how does your partner not know? But she said they don't talk about finances. She's always been in charge of it, and so she just kept putting things on the card. So I think also being a partner, if you're not the one in charge of it, still being aware of what's going on and saying, how can I help if help is needed? Do you find that it is, you know, kind of the way we are as a society now, are people almost sometimes more inclined to spend beyond their limits because they don't want to deny their kids anything? Oh, I will say from a personal perspective, how that is definitely a thing. You want, as a parent, you want your kids to have everything. You want them to have their experiences. You want them to do the things, have all the things. I'm also in marketing, so I totally understand marketing to kids and what companies are doing when you've got Bluey and things like that. Right. And I think in our family specifically, we try to use that as an opportunity to say, yes, you can have this, but what is the trade-off? Are we going to sell a different toy that you haven't played with in months, that you don't care about anymore, to maybe help pay for this new toy that you really want? That's a really big one in our house. We had a rummage sale a couple weeks ago, and my son's like, here's all my toys, and dropped them on the table, and he's like, and I want $100 for them. And I'm like,
okay, that's not quite how it works, but just using that as another opportunity to say, what are these trade-offs that you're going to have? Are you going to use it as a chore if you're a family that pays for chores?
Well, and I like the idea too of maybe moving kids away from the instant gratification thing, saying, yeah, you can have that, but we're going to have to save for a couple weeks or a couple of months for it. And I think that teaches a life lesson too, which is, things don't always come immediately exactly when you want them.
Exactly.
So that can be a beneficial thing too. So yes, we're going to have to leave it there, Danielle. Thank you so much. This was really fun. That is Danielle Anderson. She is the manager of youth strategies at Altra Federal Credit Union. You are listening to Dollars and Cents here on the Leighton Media Podcast Network. Please join us for our next installment.
Dollars and Cents is a monthly podcast presented by Altra Federal Credit Union and the Leighton Media Podcast Network. Find this and other podcasts on demand at WinonaRadio.com.